Coming. I'd like to talk this morning about a case that involved child sex crimes. And on April 28th, MCSO Cybercrimes Unit received a cyber tip, from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children on a case that's something that if you have children, parents need to know who they're communicating with over the internet, because it is ripe with sexual predators on the internet. And I would encourage everyone to really pay attention to who their kids are talking to, because it's easy for young victims to get exploited by some of these perverts. So this case is fairly straightforward. We had a 34-year-old male here that was actually exploiting a young girl in Boonville, Indiana. And so this goes across state lines, and it's not just our neighborhoods. So there's a lot of predators out there, there's a lot of children out there that we need to make sure that we're protecting them, and that's really up to the parents to make sure who their children are communicating with. And with that, I'm going to bring up Detective Sergeant Ogerchuk, and he's the investigator of the case, and he's over our cyber crimes unit, and that's the unit that does all these cases. And one other thing too is the detectives that work these cases have to have specialized training. It's for their eyes only, and some of the things to see, the images, the photographs that these young children are sending to people that are exploiting them. And so it gets very technical from here, so that's why we're going to have Sergeant Ogerchuk.
So I'm Sergeant Dennis Ogerchuk. I'm the supervisor over our cybercrimes unit in the Major Crimes Division. We work internet crimes against children. That's one of our main focuses in the unit in cybercrimes that we work. And regarding to this case, on April 28th in 2026, our cybercrimes unit received a cyber tip that was made by Cash App to NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The MCSO, like I said, Cybercrimes Unit is part of the Arizona Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. MCSO Cybercrimes detectives opened up an investigation into this report under incident number 2026-010925. The cyber tip from Cash App reported that an adult male subject who was living in Arizona was repetitively sending money to a juvenile female in the state of Indiana, and that the two appeared to have no other known relationship to each other. These financial transactions appeared to be suspicious in nature, which is what generated the tip. Cybercrimes Unit personnel began conducting initial intel, which revealed that our male suspect, Stefan Santos, who's 34 years old, was a registered sex offender. This information raised the priority level of our investigation and our detectives working the case. A little bit later, we also learned that he had been arrested by the MCSO Cybercrimes Unit back in 2011 for sexual exploitation of a minor from a peer-to-peer file sharing investigation involving CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material, under that incident report, which was 2011-184614. Stefan was convicted and sentenced in that investigation, and he served approximately 6 years altogether in the Arizona Department of Corrections from his initial sentence from that case, combined with some subsequent probation violations from the original offense. Back in 2011, I was actually the case agent on that investigation, approximately like 15 years ago, when I was a detective in the unit. The 2011 case, like I said, was a proactive investigation into peer-to-peer file sharing. MCSO detectives knew during this new investigation that Stefan's admissions made during my interview with him back then, that he was sexually attracted to minor females aged from 10 to 15 years old. Stefan made those statements back in 2011 and stated that he had a problem and he was sick and needed help. The ICAC detectives in the Warwick County Sheriff's Office in Indiana simultaneously received this same new cyber tip in 2026 from NECMEC. Our ICAC detectives in the cybercrimes unit here at MCSO worked with their detectives, and they conducted an interview with the juvenile who was 14 years old, like the sheriff mentioned, in Boonville, Indiana. They learned from their interview that she had in fact been sending sexually explicit images to our suspect via Snapchat. And we further learned that our suspect had traveled to Indiana on at least 2 occasions where they met in person and allegedly had sexual interactions on 3 separate instances dating back to when she was 13 years old in 2024. On May 4th, at approximately 1500 hours, just 6 days after MCSO first received the new cyber tip, the MCSO Tactical Operations Unit detained our suspect near his residence without incident. Cybercrime personnel executed a residential search warrant in reference to this investigation with the assistance of the Electronic Evidence Analysis and Remote Surveillance Unit, our Digital Forensics Unit, and detectives from the Special Victims Unit. Detectives and forensic techs searched Stefan's residence in the area of Bethany Home and Dysart Road in Litchfield Park, which was Stefan's mother's home, and attempted to conduct an interview with the suspect post-Miranda. Stefan immediately invoked his right to an attorney, and he did not speak to our cybercrimes detectives. We seized numerous cell phones from the residence that belonged to Stefan. Forensic techs were able to gain access to those phones without the passcodes, and the images of the victim in question were recovered in Stefan's possession by MCSO on his phone. Further digital forensic examinations are now being conducted to search for any additional evidence and to help identify any potential unknown new victims here in Maricopa County. Stefan's vehicle, which is a black 2022 Toyota Camry with red leather interior, was seized during the search warrant and towed to the Major Crimes Division for processing, as it was allegedly used in the offense in Indiana. Stefan was arrested by MCSO and booked into jail on charges being filed through the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for violations of 2 counts of ARS 13-3553A2, which is sexual exploitation of a minor, which is a Class 2 felony and a dangerous crime against children. These charges were from the chargeable images sent to the suspect by the victim via Snapchat that he was in possession of here in Maricopa County. Stefan was given a $500,000 cash-only bond during his initial court appearance, and he's also currently non-bondable on a probation violation under his booking number, which is George 252889. Charges are also currently pending in the state of Indiana against Stefan Santos from the Warwick County Sheriff's Office investigation. Stefan has worked for 3 different trucking companies as a driver in the Valley. He frequently travels all over the East and West Valley, as well as northern Arizona, including Black Canyon City, Prescott, Chino Valley, Camp Verde, and Cottonwood. Stefan has utilized Snapchat to mutually exchange images with minors, utilizing various usernames, along with Cash App in this case, and he also utilizes other apps such as Roblox, Telegram, and WhatsApp. Stefan previously lived in an apartment in the area of El Mirage and Camelback Road in Litchfield Park, prior to recently moving back into the residence with his mother. The detectives, forensic techs, intel analysts, and the Tactical Operations Unit of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office really did outstanding work on this investigation. We had this suspect in custody within 6 days of receiving the initial NECMEC cyber tip. I know these cases can be very difficult to work. from my experience and from my detectives and our forensic folks to deal with. It can be some of the hardest crimes for detectives, but they're also some of the most important to protect children who are exposed to these dangers via the internet. Additional digital forensic examinations of Stefan's cellular devices are ongoing with MCSO right now. If anyone has any information regarding any sex crimes involving minors at all, or involving Stefan Santos or his black 2022 Toyota Camry four-door with red leather interior that maybe he's involved in, please contact the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office at 602-876-1011. This is still an ongoing investigation here in Maricopa County and in Indiana, and there may be some details that we're not at liberty to discuss. Stefan Santos is presumed innocent of these charges until proven guilty in a court of law. That's pretty much the summary of the case. I don't know if anybody has any questions or if the sheriff or anyone has anything else to say. Thank you.
How likely is it that there may be other victims out there?
From some of the evidence that we received from the search warrants and some things that we're not discussing right now, we feel pretty likely there's going to be other victims, possibly here in Maricopa County. Right now, we're still working on the cell phone examinations. They're kind of in the beginning stages. So we'll be, looking through chats and conversations and doing some forensic work and analysis to try to identify victims. But if anybody is aware of any, that would be helpful.
Have you worked with any other states in between here and where the girl was located to see if anything transpired in between?
We have not yet, just working directly with Indiana and here in the county. We are looking at, we're doing some infotainment system extractions of the vehicle for GPS locations and things like that. That kind of stuff is in the works. We could possibly be doing that. The ICAC task force is a nationwide. We're all work together pretty frequently. So we're in communication as ICAC detectives across the nation and also here in Arizona with all the other agencies. I think there's 60-some affiliates here in the state of Arizona and 60-some across the nation as well, as far as just everybody that's involved in the ICAC task force. So that information will be out there, and we'll be looking into all those possibilities.
You mentioned that back in the 2011 case that he had expressed that he was sick and needed help. Are there any rehabilitation programs for people when they get out or through the correction system that you know of that he either had access to or participated in?
Yeah, they are definitely. I know treatment is definitely something there that happens frequently. He was a registered sex offender. He was current with our sex offender notification unit as far as reporting his addresses and working with some of the stuff through therapy and I think they are subject to polygraph examinations, sometimes compelled in some of their treatment plans and things like that happen. So those things were going on, and the sheriff's office was monitoring as far as his current addresses. He was staying current on his sex offender registration.
At this point, do you have photos of other victims that you're trying to identify?
Right now, we do not. We are like I said, just the beginning stages of the examination. He didn't speak with us and provide passcodes, but we were able to access the phone, and we are starting those examinations to try to identify other juveniles from names and images and things like that. Back in 2011, he was arrested for the peer-to-peer file sharing images, which was, I think that case, there was no known victims in that investigation, so that was more of things that he was downloading and sharing online that were children being victimized through the internet. But this case is unfortunately involving a child victim in Indiana. So
Haven't ruled it out, just haven't gotten that far on the phone.
correct.
Regarding the system that gave you that alert, did that tip happen because you guys were tracking him?
From this case or from the 2011 case?
From this situation when you guys
From
were
this case?
reported it?
So this case was just reported by Cash App. So they saw suspicious transactions, that, there was no known relationship between this adult here in Arizona and a child who, her Cash App had to have an adult sponsor in order to even have that app. So they monitored those. There was some text conversation that seemed suspicious in nature related to some of the money that was moving from Arizona being paid to the child victim. So that prompted Cash App to report that activity to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So there's literally hundreds of electronic service providers that report cases to NECMEC daily. So, we have here in Arizona, and just the Arizona ICAC Task Force, we have thousands and thousands of cyber tips. At the Sheriff's Office, I believe we're sitting on about 130 cyber tips right now alone, not counting our proactive investigations or our investigations coming in that are reported by the public here in the county. So NECMEC gets millions of tips a year worldwide. They're kind of the hub of those tips coming in, and those tips get sent to, here in Arizona, they get sent to Phoenix PD, and then Phoenix PD sends those cyber tips out to all the affiliated agencies in the state that work ICAC cases. So this tip was just generated by Cash App, seeing that suspicious activity and reporting it to the center.
You mentioned Cash App, WhatsApp, Roblox. What apps would you say watch out for on your child?
All of them. I think, monitoring your child's device is just crucial. We see probably cyber tips, we're getting the most from TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. We are seeing a trend of more Cash App cases. We have 5 or 6 right now that we're working from Cash App at the Sheriff's Office, and we probably have a dozen or so more that we're proactively working on financial transactions. So that is kind of a trend that's coming up, that we're working, in addition to all the peer-to-peer and BitTorrent file sharing and undercover chat and things like that are happening. But all of the apps, obviously, an app like Roblox seems, concerning for 34-year-old male, and there's other things that other apps, but yeah, pretty much any app, I would say.
Did you say Roblox is how he met this individual, or how did
Through Snapchat. Yeah, this case was that's how they were communicating initially, was through Snapchat. So the detectives in Indiana did look at their Snapchat conversation between the victim and our suspect here. She was able to identify him and his vehicle, and that's how the initial conversation started, was through Snapchat, and it just evolved from there. Cash App was the company that reported the financial transactions, which is what made us aware of the investigation.
In your interview with the 14-year-old girl, was she aware that this man was 34 years old, or?
The Warwick County Sheriff's Office interviewed her in Indiana, so we didn't speak with her. That investigation's still ongoing, and she was aware of his age, and he was aware of her age. That is correct.
Talk about the importance of different agencies in different states working together. Before, people thought maybe if they crossed state lines, it'd be easier to get away with something like this. But with all the states involved in agencies, it's kind of tightening.
Incredibly important, yeah. Our unit, I've been, like I said, I worked in this unit as a detective, and then promoted, and eventually came back to supervise the unit, and been doing that for a lot of years now as well. Our unit does frequently get investigations that take us out of state. We go and do search warrants in other states frequently, and travel to other states to work investigations along with other ICAC detectives to serve search warrants and contact suspects or victims in other states. And that network is super important. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force really does work together well, and reaching out to any task force, an ICAC detective across the nation is usually instantly, hey, what can we do to help? And they're on board. We work cases for other states, where we're contacting victims and suspects here on the regular. So that is a super important relationship.
How much money are we talking about? What he said?
very small amount, really. I think the total was only around $51 over like 22 transactions. So a lot of times it was just conversation or a couple dollars here and there. It wasn't a lot of money. We do see that frequently in other investigations where, kids playing video games and they, get a $5 gift card could be a big deal to a small child. So it wasn't a large amount.
Is it possible this gets bumped up to a federal case because it's between at least 2 states?
I don't believe so. I think it would probably just stay here with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and then the charges that are pending in Indiana out of their attorney's office there. Okay, thank you again very much, everyone. Thanks.
Sheriff, I had a question about there was a burglary at the medical examiner's office. Any update on that, or since we've got you here?
Why would you bring that up? This is, let me just make one last comment. It's so critical for the parents out there to monitor every application that your children are using through the internet. I can't express that enough. I have a 14-year-old granddaughter myself, and so these cases are very, very serious, frequent. This young girl is going to be traumatized for the rest of her life because of this case. And please, I implore parents to pay attention to what their kids are doing over the internet. Okay. So I cannot tell you everything that happened the other morning, but I'll give you a brief at a higher level. And the reason is we can't really talk about it yet is because there were, well, let me start this way. On 5/20 at approximately 1:49 hours, we got a call that somebody was breaking into the medical examiner's office. So deputies responded to that call, and they found an individual that had broken into the medical examiner's office by breaking the glass, getting into the office area, then making his way down to where the medical examiner stores the bodies. There was approximately 11 bodies that were the bags that they were kept in. They were broken open, and some of them were actually touched. And the reason we're not really talking about this right now is because the medical examiner and the sheriff's office, we know the family out there, the family of these individuals that were in the medical examiner's office. We want to make sure they all get notified that something occurred, and until we can make those 11 notifications, we really don't want to talk about the nuts and bolts of the case. But I can tell you that the individual is in custody, and hopefully he'll stay in custody for a while until we can clarify exactly what happened. That's pretty much it.
Were any of these bodies criminal cases? If so, is that a problem for chain of custody?
Well,
going forward?
No, okay. Rico said no. No. A couple were, just down there for whatever reason. An unattended death, you have to go to the medical examiner. Suicide, you go to the medical examiner. So they weren't victims of a crime. Okay? And so stay tuned. We'll do a press conference when we are able to, after we make those 11 notifications. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.